Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Whew, what a couple of weeks. And so we thought we better bring back the expert, Kiersten Hill, Director of Nonprofit Solutions from FireSpring, to talk about crisis communications.
Yeah.
Whoa, sister. It's been a little wackadoo, huh?
I'll tell you, it feels like it's been a year in about 2 weeks.
It's so funny because for those of you, I'm sure, figured out that there's a nexus between the new federal administration and some of the things that have been going on. One of the big things that happened while we were on air. I left my studio, went right into my office, which is literally next door. There's a wall, and all hell broke loose. I had all these people calling and texting and emailing, saying, "What?"
Yep,
And so crisis communications is where it's at.
absolutely.
And I've got to say, this is just a great skill to have no matter what.
Mhm.
It's not just about this moment in time.
Yes.
It's really something that's salient, I think, depending on where you are in the trajectory of your career. So I'm really excited, Kiersten, to talk to you about this and get your perspective and your wisdom so that we're not all freaked out.
Yep. That's the goal, right? We want to calm people down and give everybody some really tangible things that when everything else feels out of control, here are the things that you can control.
Right. Well, I think that's the beginning point and the foundational theory of how we're going to talk about this, because it does nobody any good to get everybody, as my mother would say, panties in a bunch. You got to kind of like take the temperature down and be thoughtful so that you're not creating other problems, right? And so
Absolutely.
we're gonna talk about that. Something that's never a problem for us on the Nonprofit Show are our amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, Your Part-Time Controller, and Third Sector Company, along with Clear Impact. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I have assembled this amazing group of co-hosts. They come from all over the country. They're incredibly diverse in what they do, what they represent, and where they come from. And so they're just marvelous. I'm flying solo today because I wanted, honestly, Kristen, all to myself, because my background is media and publishing. So I'm like, I don't want another voice in here. I want to go right to the source. So I'm just calling her out.
I
Kiersten
love
Hill.
it. I
Yeah,
love
well,
it.
it's kind of the truth. Kiersten Hill, Director of Nonprofit Solutions for FireSpring. Let's start with this. What the heck is FireSpring and what do you all do?
It's a really great question. So, FireSpring is a full-service media and marketing company. We specialize in nonprofit organizations. So, we're most known in the nonprofit space for our nonprofit websites. So, we have an awesome website tool that nonprofits can get into at a really reasonable rate. Lets them do everything they need a website to do. We also are a printer, so we do print and direct mail. And we can do, large scale projects, small scale projects, business cards, all the way to catalogs. It's really comprehensive. And then in between that, we squish marketing services. So anything you would think of as traditional marketing or advertising services, we can handle all of those. And I came to FireSpring to work here because I was a client first. I've spent most of my career in nonprofit management and fundraising. And so here at FireSpring, I get to help nonprofits to come up with better ways to do things and do their work better and easier and more efficiently and all of those things. So that's a little bit about FireSpring and me.
It's super cool. And you just touched on all the things that we need when
Yep.
times are good, when times are bad, we even need
Mhm.
them more. And so I'm
Yep.
just thrilled to have you engaged in this, because over the trajectory of my career, I have found it most frustrating when you work with a consultant or an expert, or you hear information and they only know one part of the vertical. I mean,
Yeah.
they can't understand the bigger picture or the different inputs. And so that's what I think is so magical about this. And we have a lot to chat about. So we need to
Yeah.
jump right in. And this is like the first point I need to ask. What
Yeah.
the heck do you not say during a crisis? And
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about a political crisis. I'm
No.
talking about, I served on an organization where we were a shelter, and we would have clients pass away,
Mhm.
and what do you do? And how do you deal with what is a crisis by defining it first, I guess, but what do
Mhm.
you not say?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, if we're talking about crisis, I think there's two different kinds of crisis, right? There's sort of the negative crisis. That's kind of how I feel like where we're at right now. Like there's lots of uncertainty, there's
Mhm.
potential funding cuts, all of those things. There are also good crisis, like, we're going to get this super famous visitor who's coming to our space, and we know our website's going to get more traffic. Like, it's all good stuff, but that can also be a crisis. And
Yeah.
so either way, you have to be prepared. And I think that when you start getting those calls from the media for whatever reason,
Yeah.
you need to have a plan. And the last thing, in my opinion, that you ever want to say is no comment. Okay.
Exactly. Thank
No,
you.
right. No comment always automatically is going to make you look guilty. And I
Mhm.
think,
Yeah.
and even if it's a good thing, like why do you not have a comment about this, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that the very best thing that we can say instead is, thank you so much for reaching out. I need to gather my thoughts, and
Mhm.
can I call you right back? Right.
Mhm.
So even if you know exactly what you want to say, I feel like that should always be your first response is, let me gather my thoughts and I'll call you right back.
Mhm.
But we don't want to say no comment. We don't want to just all of a sudden start spewing things off the top of our heads,
Mhm.
because you want to be organized and thoughtful and strategic in what you are telling people. And so I think that's the very first recommendation that I have, is always have a comment, even if it's let me pause and gather myself and call you right back.
Okay, yay team, love that. I totally agree. I think there's absolutely nothing worse than saying no comment. I think you
Mhm.
can say no comment basically like what you just said.
Yeah.
However, I want to ask you this before we go on. Is it ever okay to say I don't know, but let me find the answer? Or does that put you in the same negative
No, I
buggy?
I think I think that is a fine statement,
Okay. Okay.
as long as you go find the answer and you make sure you do the follow up. Don't say, "Gosh, I don't know," and then just leave it out there
Yeah.
hanging. We don't want to do that, but I think, acknowledging that maybe I don't have that information in front of me right now. Let me gather it, and I'll call you right back.
Mhm.
That I think is absolutely fine, because
Okay.
better to pause and give correct information than to try and stumble through it and maybe give inaccurate information or go off strategy. I think the other thing that I think of, particularly related to this crisis that we're sort of facing right now, this potential funding crisis, is there's certain language that we may not be able to use right now. So, how can we expand our vocabularies as organizations and find other ways to say the same thing?
Interesting.
So, how can we
Interesting.
not use necessarily the words diversity, or not necessarily use equity, but how can we talk about all
Mhm.
is all? Like, our public school system in Lincoln, Nebraska does a great job of this. They say all means all
Mhm.
students, all the time. That's essentially the same way
Yeah.
of talking about diversity,
Yeah.
equity, and inclusion. And so if you are trying to avoid certain words as you're
Mhm.
speaking in this crisis time, then let's find some new language to describe it. It doesn't mean we have to change our values or we have to hide things. It means we have to get a little bit more creative in how we're approaching the language we're using.
So that means we just don't use cuss words?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I mean, I cannot say that, because that's my specialty. That's my special form of communication. So I would never tell anyone that.
Oh
Maybe
my
not
god.
publicly, but yeah.
My producer's gonna, like, just be, like, freaking out that I said that. But, yeah, I had to bring a little levity to that, but
Yeah,
I agree with you. I
absolutely.
think
Yeah.
this is a concept that is, diversity and inclusion. These are old concepts. We have
Yeah.
used different language, and we just
Yeah.
need to look at it, use different vocabulary, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the negativity. I gotta say,
Yeah.
especially in this climate where we are getting just bombarded by things, social media, social outrage via technology, things of that nature.
Mhm.
How do we deal with these negative comments? I'm going to woman up and say, this is something that's very hard for me. And you can hear one bad thing and it just dominates the 7 good things that came before it, right? It's just
Yeah.
such a psychological problem.
It
But
is.
how do we do this when we have citizen journalists and we have this community discussion piece, if you will, going on?
I think the first thing is this is not the time to be an ostrich. This is not the time to stick your head in the sand and pretend that that is not happening.
Okay.
I think that we need to respond when people say something, and that response needs to be public. So if someone comes at you on your Facebook page, for instance,
Mhm.
I think that you want to publicly respond. You want to address the person by their first name. You
Oh,
want, because
interesting.
you want to make this,
You want to humanize.
you want to humanize it, right? So let's respond with empathy. Let's offer some solutions. Let's thank them for the candid feedback. Let's be authentic and really take what they're saying and answer their concerns and their questions.
Mhm.
And again, you want to do that in a public way. Now, if this person keeps coming back and they keep, dragging things down, then I think what we do is we say, I am going to send you a direct message, right? So we're
Right,
telling everyone else who's watching this mess happen, we're
right.
telling them that we are still dealing with this problem, that we are still, in communication, where we're not just cutting off communication,
Yeah.
but we are doing it in a way that takes it to a more private arena as opposed to
Mhm.
playing it out on your Facebook page. But we I think part of it is we want to diffuse the situation as best we can. And so we do that by being human. We do that by being authentic, and we do it by really addressing whatever the issue is, and being really upfront and transparent about it.
Mhm. I like that approach because I think that it deflates, the vitriol at some point in time. But I also think that I loved your comment about using somebody's name because I think a lot of time there's this sense of anonymity and that you
Mhm,
can, spew out anger and frustration and hate
mhm.
even. But then yet when you come in contact with, a human or whatever, um, it takes the temperature down. And
Yeah.
I found from years of publishing, I would have this, and people would like something that they would not like something they saw in one of my newspapers,
Mhm.
and immediately, if I picked up the phone and called them
Yeah.
and said, I'm, Julia C. Patrick, publisher, I want to chat with you about this, immediately their tone would shift.
Yeah.
And they'd oftentimes end up apologizing. It was a
Yeah. Yeah.
fascinating thing. And it would be like, oh, I
Yep.
was having a bad day. I didn't think
Mhm,
anyone would read this comment or respond.
mhm.
And I would always say, my team and I work really hard.
Mhm.
And so I want to know what we could do better.
Yeah.
And when I would approach it with this, it would change the dynamic. And it's really, really an interesting thing. And so there are a lot of ways to do it, but I think
Yeah.
you're brilliant. Your
Yeah.
comment is brilliant. Don't put your head in the sand.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is, how can you go back to the organization's values? Who are you as an organization? What is your mission? Provide that reassurance that here are the high standards that we have as an organization. Here's what our mission is. Here's the impact that we're having.
Mhm.
And really go back to centering the conversation and maybe try and find the commonalities.
Mhm.
If you're an organization that helps kids, we all want kids to succeed, right? So how can we find those commonalities that everyone universally should be able to agree on?
I love that. And I think that's a genuine thing. And it helps maybe navigate the conversation back to something that's more realistic. And so that kind of takes us to our next question for you. And that is, how do you determine those basics and focusing in on the things that you can control?
Yeah.
Because this is a big thing. Like, I would say some of the upset that's occurring, it's coming out of Washington. And we are, for most of us, way far away from that in so many ways,
Yep.
physically, mentally, corporately. So how do we understand the sense of going back to basics?
Yeah. I think we really have to go back to focusing on our mission,
Okay.
looking at what our impact has been.
Okay.
We have to craft narratives and stories, and we have to really embrace and live in those stories. And I think we go to our most trusted donors first.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the reason I say that is because you have to try this language on, right? You have to make sure that this is the right strategy, and who better to try that on than those folks that know and trust you. And so go to those most trusted donors first, reinforce the core values, share the stories, check in on them, make sure they're okay, let them know what's happening in your organization, what this impact would be. And then after you've tried it out a little bit, then is this the strategy that we're taking moving forward? But I think that, the instinct sometimes is, oh my gosh, I'm going to go public with this. Well, let's pull it back. Let's go to our most trusted allies and advocates and make sure that we're on the right track. And then we can move forward publicly if we need to.
Yeah. I love that. I love that approach because it seems to me like it's part of just general stewardship anyway. And you don't want your biggest stakeholders to become fearful and a part of the mess, because that builds disengagement.
Yes.
The
Oh, yeah.
immediate response is to pull back. And so, yeah, that's brilliant. See, I knew you were the right person to bring on to talk about that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I knew you were going to say some really great things. We've had some great comments come in during the show, and I've got to say one that came in from a friend of the show and somebody who's also been a guest, and he writes, "I love this. It's like old-fashioned behavior modification." Do you remember BMod from college? You and then if you're a parent, you use it daily. Behavior modification. And I love that comment because it seems to me that we forget that, and that we just get into the mud and we get all, exercised, versus, like you used that word, pause, pulling back, and then redirecting. So.
And honestly, part of the reason that I've been talking about this so much is because I have to remind myself of these things. Because my instinct is to get in the mud is the perfect description, right? Like that is my instinct.
Yeah.
I want to put on my crusader cape and I want to fly off and defend all of the things that I believe in. And sometimes I have to remind myself these same things. I got to pull back. I have to make sure that my thoughts are coalesced and strategic. And then how can I move forward in the best way?
Yeah, I needed to hear that because I'm definitely in that same camp. I'm very passionate about our sector, about our work, what we do. And then I get like all, amped up, and then it doesn't help anyone, including myself, including my own mental health, because it's been dicey. I mean, I'm like you are in that I'm a bridge to people that are doing things. And so I just hear morning, noon, and night, all these things and all of these stresses that people have. And it's really a burden. And so you do have to kind of pull back and refocus. And I loved what you said, go back to your mission and determining where it is you're going to come from. So part and parcel of this, I mean, you and I, we can get up in front of the cameras, we can talk, we can talk to reporters, we can get all this done. But hello, we have our boards and we have other members.
Yep.
How do we do this if we're going to have voices in the community chatting about things that's going on, dealing in a crisis, assigned or not, just because they're out there, they're given a voice or a platform, or people are
Yep.
asking them, hey, I know you're on the board. What do you think about this?
Yes.
How do we make those connections work and not create more crisis?
Right. I think the first thing that we have to do is over communicate.
Oh,
If
okay.
you think that you have told the board 100 times and that they all know exactly what to say, you need to tell them about 3 more times, because it just
Too bad.
doesn't sink in the same way, right? So we want to make sure that we're over communicating.
Yeah.
Make sure that they understand, in general, nonprofit funding. You would think that every board member would understand that, but they don't. And
Right.
so, do they have a clear understanding overall of nonprofit funding, how nonprofit funding works, how government grants work?
Mhm.
And then, do they understand for your organization where those funding sources come from and what the impact could be in this particular crisis? Then, do they understand the core values of the organization? Do they know why you're doing the work? Because they're out talking in the community, you want them to be knowledgeable and you want them to understand and focus on the why of the work that you are doing, so that you're really, again, going just back to those basics of communication. And so I would host a Zoom. Like, I would get online right now with my board members and say, I need 30 minutes of your time. We don't have to come together in the same room. Let's just do 30 minutes and let's get together and talk about what's going on and what the impact is, so that they then can go be the advocates for you that you need them to be in the community to talk about what the impact is. Preparing talking points is
Yeah.
always good. And then, figuring out who's going to be, is there going to be one spokesperson from the board? It doesn't always have to be the board president. Maybe that's not their skill set. Maybe they're great at running board meetings, but bad at talking to the newspaper. So is there
Right.
somebody else in the organization or on the board that can assume that role? Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to be focusing our boards on right now, is
Mhm.
really making sure that we're preparing them adequately for that advocacy role.
Let me ask you this question, because I absolutely agree with everything you've said, but I feel like a lot of times we overburden them with information. I'm wondering how you feel about, the 3 top points or
Mhm.
top 5 points, or do you think that we should cull it down, or just get them as much information as we can?
I think, if possible, do it depending on board member, right? So there are some
Oh,
board members that need all of that information. And
okay.
there are some that just want the top 3 points. So probably what I would do is a longer summary and then the 3 main talking points, so
Gotcha.
that you're meeting both of those personalities and learning styles and
Mhm.
talking styles. But I think it depends. If all you have time for is the 3 talking points,
Mhm.
then that's the critical piece. But more than anything, I think just having an understanding and making sure they understand how the funding works. Because that, I think we come in and we know that we're getting a grant, and they know that you're getting a grant from somewhere, but do they know that that grant is coming through the county, but that the originator of that grant money is
Here.
the Department of Juvenile Justice, right?
Right.
The
Right.
feds. And so that has potential to trickle down and impact
Mhm.
everything that happens in your organization. And
Mhm.
often boards don't understand to that
Mhm.
level. And so really giving them a good visual and a good idea of how that's all working, so that they can understand and really advocate for you.
I just think that's brilliant advice. And I just think that it's like generally good advice, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, crisis aside, right? Crisis aside,
Mhm.
this is valuable information because it's strategic, and it will help
Mhm.
those decision makers make better decisions
Yeah,
on behalf of the organization. So
absolutely.
it's not just a crisis thing. I mean, it's just something generally that should be done. And to your point, it's not being done enough.
Yeah.
You might think that they understand, but they don't. We don't have a lot of time left. And honest to God, you're my soul sister, because I could talk about this all
Same.
day long.
Same.
'Cause it's like my
Mhm.
world.
Uh-huh.
Um, why increase marketing and development budgets? And again, we're
Mhm.
going to put this through the lens of crisis.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times the the sense is, oh, I got to pull back. I got to get out. I got to, not be out front because
Mhm.
I've already had too much, too much attention. What do you say to that?
Yeah. That's the wrong instinct, right? That's our instinct, and it couldn't be further from the truth. When you get to a point where things are, uncertain, and you have some crisis and you're trying to communicate to multiple audiences, those are the times that you need to invest in marketing and communications. And that's also the time when you need to make sure that you are doing good donor stewardship, and
Yeah.
that you are, making sure that you are diversifying your funding so that you've got private dollars coming in addition to your grant dollars. It's the time that you really need to be investing in your organization so that you are ready and prepared to handle, whatever is coming. And the instinct is, no, I'm going to cut everything that's not direct program. But when you do that, you're cutting off your ability to properly communicate to who you need to communicate to,
Right.
and to diversify your funding streams.
Right. I agree with you. I think it's one of those things that it's, you're looking at a report and you look at the numbers and there's a lot of fear. I'm going back to what you said earlier. Is you think that your team will understand, even your internal leadership
Oh,
team
yeah.
might not always understand
Yep.
or know how to read this information, and then decisions get made that end up shooting you in the foot,
Yeah.
that end up creating more problems. And I agree. I also think, and no one wants to say this, but I will call it out. I think in the ecosystem of media, that when you are making investments in media, that puts you up a little bit ahead.
Oh,
And I know that
absolutely.
nobody wants to say that because it seems like,
Mhm.
you're paying to play, but you are paying to play.
Mhm.
And so you got to man up and understand that that's how it works. I'm not saying that that's going to solve all your problems, but stories get killed a lot of times by decision makers in media,
Mhm.
social, print, broadcast, radio, because they're an advertiser.
Right.
And,
Yep.
again, it's not popular to say, but it does happen.
Mhm.
And so, and if nothing else, it gives you an outlet, a stream with which to go and sell your story, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
If you're
Yep.
if you're somebody that's actively investing in a media outlet, you're going to be able to go back to the people that you work with and say, I need to talk to somebody,
Yeah.
to navigate the
Mhm.
story, because what's going on is not true, or what's going on I
Mhm.
need help with, or whatever the situation is.
Exactly. It gives you a door to go
Yeah,
in. It
sure. Thank you.
gives you an entry point to be able to communicate with that outlet, and it's really important that you have a place to start. Uh, the other reason I think you want to make this investment is most nonprofit leaders are not communication experts, and
Right.
so we think we probably have an idea of what we need to be doing,
Yeah.
but these are the times when you really want to bring in the experts to make sure that you are maximizing what you should and could be doing, and that you're also doing the right message at the right time to the right audience. And if you don't have that skill set, then now is the time to bring in a trusted outsourcing partner to help you do that. Because this is the time when you want to make sure that you're maximizing your communication opportunities.
Right. We're going to have to leave it at that. I think that's brilliant. We had a viewer just write in, authenticity will always be trendy. And that
Absolutely.
really dovetails to what you've been saying here
Mhm.
today, that, we need to be precise and thoughtful and authentic and navigate these things, because they will come, and
Yes.
they build, they wane, they wax. I mean, it's just part of being in business, for profit or nonprofit,
Yes,
right? It doesn't
absolutely.
matter.
Absolutely. These are great skills no matter what. Yeah.
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 Yeah, no matter what.
Awesome.
Well, Kiersten Hill, what a pleasure it has been. Like I said, you're one of my soul sisters, because
Same.
this
Same.
whole trajectory of conversation.
Yep.
Director of Nonprofit Solutions at FireSpring. Fascinating organization. You can go onto firespring.com, learn more about their work, their thought leadership, and how, for me, Kiersten, and we say this all the time, it's never just one thing. We need to be doing a lot of little things, a lot of different things, which can become overwhelming.
Yeah,
But
easily.
when-
Yeah.
yeah, but when we understand what some of our options are and how we continue to tell our story, it's really powerful. 1.8 million nonprofits out there in our country, all trying to, do well and go after the same things, and it's a challenge. And so we need to be thoughtful. And then we lump in some crisis firestorm kind of environments, then it makes it even more important that we look at what we're doing. So it's been really a fabulous conversation today. You started my day off great. Another thing that starts my day off great are our amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that join us day in and day out. I was telling Kristen, and I think I might have even said it at the beginning of the show, we've done more than 1,200 episodes, and we are a daily, Monday through Friday, and we're going to be jumping into the start of our 6th year in just a few weeks. So there's a lot to be talking about. There's a lot to be organizing around and thinking about. And so we are very, very grateful for our partners that join us in this mission. Kirsten, we end each and every episode with this mantra, and today I'm hearing it in a different way. It's meaning something a little different. And it's all good. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks so much.